Right now, on this hour, we want to talk about the economy, making Kenya's budget work, balancing growth, taxes and politics. To have this discussion is Dr. XN Iraki, who is an economist, karibu sana, as well as Robert Maina, Associate Director, EY Tax. Gentlemen, karibuni sana, you are on the hot seat. But then notwithstanding, let's start from a level where we just came back from Djibouti, a beautiful country, right? Biggest resource is its port. They use that to feed other countries, landlocked countries like Ethiopia. It is a country that also just came off an election and voted in their president for the 6th term. Matters to do with media is closed. They only have state-owned media. One would ask the question if they are thinking of expanding the same. Maybe Kenya is a good place to come and benchmark. They also have the U.S. base that is in the country in terms of ensuring that there is security. It is a country that has a different, it's multifaceted in terms of the French being their colony. Chinese are in the country. The U.S. are there at the moment, as well as their Somali heritage that does exist. But let's go to the proverb this morning. The proverb that we have says, people are bones and blood, but diversity is beauty. People are bones and blood, but diversity is a beauty. Robert Maina, how would you interpret it?
Wow. Repeat that.
People are bones and blood, but diversity is beauty.
People are bones and blood, but diversity is a beauty.
Yes.
Well, I think how to look at it is that in our diversity we find strength. And in our African context, there's a term we use as Ubuntu. You are because I am.
I am.
So it is in our diversity that we find strength. And despite our differences, in that diversity, there is a strength in that. Yeah.
Prof, how would you interpret it?
It's a very fascinating proverb. Good morning, Kenyans. You didn't also tell us that Djibouti is very hot.
It is.
So, and next to the Red Sea, and very near the Middle East, where there are a lot of conflicts. It is an interesting proverb because one of the things that I always look forward to is working in diversity. Even in this studio, if you have people from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different accents, with different food, different clothes, you find more fun. So the beauty. The proverb simply means that we all have bones, we all have blood. So that does not differentiate us. We all the same.
Yes.
But when you look at diversity, now you see the multiplicity of ideas, the multiplicity of perspectives. And that is what makes Kenya a great country. One of the things that I like about this country is that we are from different communities, different tribes. We should see that as beauty and our strength.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the greatest countries in this world, the US, happens to be the most diverse. So we should not think diversity is a problem. We should see it as an asset that we should exploit so that there is competition. There is competition of ideas, competition of perspectives, and that enriches our society and makes it more innovative.
Well said, well said. Now, we talk about Kenya and where we find ourselves today in terms of the budget that we have as a country. And for a very long time, KRA that is mandated with collecting taxes that would help into funding that budget has not been meeting its set targets. But we also read from the very same book that says that Kenya, we do not have a problem of getting taxes and all that. We have a problem. We do not have a problem of revenue. We have a problem of expenditure. Prof. Dr.
I think I've heard that statement for a long time, but I need to dispute it. We don't have a problem revenue.
Yes.
I was looking at IMF and the government of Kenya revising the growth targets for this year downwards. So remember, we get revenue, tax revenues, because the economy is growing. If my business grows, if my salary grows, then my tax goes up. So the tax that I pay also goes up. So if the economy is not growing, then the tax revenue will not grow. So I agree with you that maybe that's one perspective we need to look at. That maybe why we don't get the targets, why we don't get as much tax as possible is because the economy is not growing enough. If you remember during the Kibaki era when we came up with Vision 2030, we targeted a growth rate of 10%. We have never reached there. But on the expenditure side, because it's a balance, you correct the revenue, you make use of it. I think we've also been a bit, I don't want to use the word reckless. We have not been very focused.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the reports I hear every day about what we are doing in our taxes, I don't think it's the most prudent thing to do. So let's get more taxes, but also let's use it prudently. Because Kenyans don't complain about paying taxes. I've never come across a Kenyan who said I can't pay taxes. The question they always raise is our taxes being used prudently? Once we balance more taxes because the economy is growing, making it grow, and then we use it prudently, very few Kenyans will complain, including myself and my colleague here.
Robert, then one would ask the question, why is it that we're seeing the economy not growing? My business, I've started it down here. I'm hoping in the next quarter one, quarter two, or next year, my business is somewhere where if I had one employer, I have two more. So that means two extra people who are paying taxes to the government of Kenya because because my business is doing well. But you look at businesses today and we see a lot of people are being laid off because the economy is not doing well and running businesses is really difficult. So is it in terms of policy change that we see businesses don't grow, or what would be the reason why the economy is not growing as expected?
Yeah, and that for sure has been the main concern, because if you look at the 5 key pillars that this government has been trying to achieve, I mean, we look at 5 key thematic areas. One is agricultural transformation. And we would expect this to be a very high impact pillar, because we are seeing a very huge percentage or proportion of our economy is agricultural based. A lot of people, farmers, I mean, when you look at the people who are reliant on farming, whether directly or through indirect linkages, there are very many. We look at MSME economy. Again, we've said Kenya is an economy that is driven by SMEs. So again, if for instance, just focusing on these 2 thematic areas that the government has focused on and they are part of their key agendas, if there was clear policies and these policies were actually driving and giving people money, then we'd be expecting people to be enjoying. And I think one of the key things we've had is that circulation of money in this economy has not been very good. You can have a lot of projects maybe at the government is implementing, but the question is that leading into additional income into the pockets of people? And that's where the issue is, because the macros in this country are very good. I mean, if you talk to anyone in government, they'll tell you about the inflation, the exchange rate, everything is good. But when you go to the ground, and you speak to people there, I mean, the one issue that comes out clearly is that there is no circulation of money. Because then they are saying, I'm not able to get that, kibarua that I used to go to. Because the people in this city, because a lot of people in the urban area support a lot of people in the rural area indirectly. Let's say you have a project out there, and you are sending money to, pay farmers and people who are supporting you. So people are not doing a lot of that. That is actually now being felt on the ground. So the circulation of money, one obviously is attributable to government not paying on time. Paying bills is an issue. Yeah. I mean, government is the single most consumer when you look at, if you compare individuals. So the fact that they don't paying on time indirectly
they're not paying at all, exactly. You would say.
That's an issue there. So because if you don't pay on time, that company is not able to pay the suppliers, and that becomes a ripple effect. So that in itself is the biggest issue, I would say. The thematic areas are in order, but we are not seeing that flowing down into the common money.
Have we actually enacted zero-based budgeting in Kenya? Are we walking the talk?
Now, that's an interesting one, because I think since last year, the government has been talking of zero-based budgeting. But I think when you look at the current status, we are saying we are now having supplementary budget 1. Typically, in a perfect scenario of zero-based budgeting, you'd expect that by people, because people should have planned in advance. So if you're saying it's the Ministry of Defense, and I know it's one of the, what do you call it, defense and the internal security. It's the biggest consumer, actually, the biggest beneficiary of the supplementary budget. We would have expected at the beginning of the year, if they actually went with a zero-based budgeting, there should have been proper budgeting, and we wouldn't be expecting an additional 300, 400 billion of additional expenditure being allocated just 2 or 3 months before the end of the financial year. So it doesn't seem to me that we actually implementing to the letter zero-based budgeting, because with that you should have actually come up with a proper plan. This is what I anticipate, and if there's any divergence, it should be very minimal, not a huge, because currently we are saying the current year's budget is 4.6 trillion, not the 4.3 we were talking about. So what do we expect in the upcoming year? Even with the 4.7, we will end up with 5.something trillion. So zero-based budgeting for me, it's still not yet there.
Prof, address yourself to wastage. Address yourself to matters to do with the missed targets, why that does exist, and how that then is affecting development and issuance of services to Wananchi.
Let me reinforce what my colleague has said about why the economy is not growing. Because the economy grows in two ways: either we consume or we invest.
Yep.
And for us to consume and invest, we need to feel that tomorrow will be better than today. We need to have confidence about tomorrow. So the reason why money is not circulating is that people are not sure about tomorrow. So because of the political situation, because of what they have experienced the last few years. So if you have some money, you keep it in the bank. If you have some money, instead of starting a business, you put it in government bonds or government paper. People don't take the risk. So, but if you are confident about tomorrow, you will start that Kamjengo. If you are confident about tomorrow, you are going to get a loan and buy something or invest in something. So if we make the economic situation very, very conducive, we feel that tomorrow is very confident. And that's what the great readers have always done. They make people feel that tomorrow is great, so we consume, we invest, and the economy grows. So on wastage, I hope you are referring to the wastage in the public sector, private sector.
Public sector.
I think it is an issue that has been disturbing Kenyans, both readers and voters, for a long time. When President Uhuru Kenyatta went to public and said 2 billion are wasted a day, to me that was a shock. And since he left power, I don't think anybody has disputed that, surprisingly. So when you think of money not being put priority, remember we talked about tax revenues. We are struggling to get money. And then when you get that money, you don't put it to the right use. So what normally happens in other countries is that any tax money that you collect, you put it to the most productive sectors where you are going to get the higher returns. The returns may not be profit because government is not supposed to make profit, but people are supposed to get services. It could be schools, it could be roads, it could be airports, it could be medical services. That's where the money is supposed to go. Because when you address the most critical services in a country, people now become confident about tomorrow. They become more productive, and you see economic growth.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why the economy is not growing fast enough, to support my colleague, is because of such waste. Because if I feel my money is going to be wasted, then I'm not very enticed to work very hard. I will probably say, wacha wengine wafanya kazi. And we need to be very, very focused on reducing waste in this country. In fact, one of the issues that has concerned me the last maybe 1 year or so, maybe I'm right or wrong, is the issue of corruption has just got off the media pages. It's not as vibrant as it was maybe 2-3 years ago. And is it because there is corruption? Is it because it has become more secretive? Why are we not facing that head on? Because an economy grows when people are rewarded for working hard, when government revenues, when our revenues are put in the right use, the most productive sectors. And finally, this wastage affects long-term growth. Because people get money today, but what about tomorrow?
I mean, Prof, to just stay on the same, we look at policies that have been put in place and how that is supposed to spur economy to grow. But we also have the political class and politics and how that is affecting the economy and as a result, the budget that you're talking about. Why do I say that? In Kenya, we play politics 365 days a year. The entire period, it's just politics. And with that, research shows that would-be investors stay away because too much politics affects investment. And you read that together with the fact that due to lack of a predictable tax regime, other investors as well are saying, I'm not sure what the tax regime would be in the next 3-4 years. So I might as well just bolt and move to a jurisdiction where I can predict the tax. And with that, then you find that the country is unable to collect more, the country is unable to provide more jobs, and the economy is not growing at the level with which we expect to. So is this then a clarion call for the political class, the leadership of the country, to stop playing politics, to come up with a predictable tax regime that would enable the economy to grow at the levels that we hope?
There's a very famous statement I've heard lately that money hates noise. If you go to Norfolk Hotel, you not find out the music.
Yeah.
But if you go to a joint in Mororongo or in Kikuyu somewhere, you find a lot of noise. But who makes more noise? Who makes more money? So if you want this country to grow, then there must be less political noise. I think there's, from the time the party wins, whether it is UDA or whether it is whatever party, they start campaigning for next year.
Yes.
And you can see what is happening now. There's more and more political noise. So if I'm thinking of coming to invest $1 billion in this country, guess what I would say? Let me wait until 2027. Because I don't know what's going to happen between now and 2027 and after 2027. So investors, consumers like predictability. And that predictability is built by the political class. So you can imagine what happened the other day somewhere in Orokarau or somewhere else in Kikuyu, and I have 1 billion in Germany or in UK, and I want to come and invest it in this country. And remember, what the first starting point of any investor is the media. So they check what is happening in that country, because they not come on the ground like us. Of course, when people come to visit this country and they compare what the media says and what is on the ground, they are two different things.
Yeah.
But as an investor, you don't, even the smallest risk you take will make you run away. So let's have the politicians make less noise. And if they have to make any noise, and this was my dream in 2022, was that any noise they make will be about economics. Because remember that in run-up 2022 polls, politicians made a lot of noise,
yes, but
it was economic noise. And I was hoping that was the start of the golden age of this country, when politicians will meet, discuss policies, discuss about economic issues. But unfortunately, that's not what they are discussing. So I hope they are going to return to the basics about economics. Because if the economy is more predictable, investors will do their work, consumers will do their work. And let's also forget that the investors are not just foreign investors.
Yeah.
The most important investors are the local investors.
Yeah.
Because when there was COVID, when foreign investors leave, we are left here.
Yeah.
We are the people, we are the inheritors of this country. So let's always remember the local investors, the Mama Mboga, the SMEs, the medium-sized companies. They are the core of this country.
Yeah.
Okay, Maina, as you come in, it would be prudent to talk about the efforts by the Kenya Kwanza administration to expand the tax bracket, because there's been talk about that. Has it been actualized, bringing in the informal sector? Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, as they said. But equally, talk to us about the aspect of the government borrowing locally, because they're relying heavily on domestic borrowing to plug the budget deficits. It's a double-edged sword. It might crowd out the private sector. What's the reality as we speak right now?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Yes, and just a bit on the predictability of tax laws, because that's an area that I've been on for many years. I mean, in this country, we do have a national tax policy. We do have a national tax policy.
Yeah.
This document has been there for a couple of years now. Now, what we haven't seen is the actual implementation. And I think that is one of the risks that has been highlighted in the document itself, that you might have the policy, but is the political class ready to implement that document? We do have one document, but is it being implemented? That's a question. We do have what we call the medium-term revenue strategy, which was meant to kick off in 2024, 2025, and we are headed to the last year. It was meant to run for 3 years. But after what happened in 2024, the demonstration and the riots, everything appears to have come into a halt. Nothing is being implemented in line with that policy. As a matter of fact, what we've had and what we are seeing is some of the things that that may be coming through maybe this year's finance bill is actually a complete reverse of some of the things. So, for instance, in the mid-term revenue strategy, there was an issue of increasing the threshold for VAT registration to about 8 million. Now, what we are hearing is that they want to scrap altogether a VAT registration threshold, meaning the moment I earn the first shilling, I should register for VAT. It doesn't send the clear message that we wanted, because someone planning 3 years ago, they would have expected some of these things to be done in a certain way. So the issue we have is we do have good documents, but they are not being implemented. And that's the challenge we need to push our MPs, because actually a lot of this is done by the members of the National Assembly. Now, coming to the point of expansion, to give it to them, the KRA has done a bit of work in terms of bringing the micro and small enterprises into the tax bracket. But there are teething challenges for sure. The issue of the e-teams, and I'm sure anyone in this country is aware of, e-teams or one form or the other. That is the biggest attempt we have seen. And when I compare the attempt or the level we are at as a country, even compared to some countries in Europe, because at times you get, I'm able to analyze what's happening in Europe, across Africa, we are better ahead. But the enforcement and the fact that it's going to be a journey to ensure that people are aware of what this means, that once I issue this invoice, what does it mean for me? What are my obligations? When am I supposed to pay my taxes? When am I supposed to file my returns? That is the biggest issue we might have 1 or 2 years from now, because a lot of people will think my only responsibility is to issue this invoice. But they are not aware that at the end of the year, they need to file a return. They will probably be required to pay taxes 4 times in a year in form of installment taxes. There's that element of education that is lacking. So there's a good effort coming in, but there's more that needs to be done to ensure that people do not actually then, after 1 or 2 years, they go into hiding because it's too expensive and their things are being auctioned by KRA. On borrowing, for sure there's cash flow in this country, or there's a lot of liquidity. Banks are holding a lot of liquidity. Let me say banks, because when I look at the T-bills and the bonds that are being auctioned, they are receiving massive oversubscription, which means banks are actually having money. The issue is they have opted to give it to the government as opposed to leading to the real economy. And it comes down to the first point that we highlighted, that if the economy is not doing very well, even the private sector, and this is the case for banks, they are hesitant to actually lend to businesses because they are not assured that money will be repaid. So there's money, and I don't think even government borrowing is going to exhaust the money that banks are holding. The issue is we need to motivate banks, and the banks need to see actually the economy is performing so that they can actually, instead of giving the money to government, they can extend it to the businesses that are going to create business jobs, and spur the economy. So the issue is that divergence. The money is there, but the banks are not convinced that people are going to be able to pay once they are given this money.
Prof, I want to look at the issue of taxation. There is our listener here who's just said, Professor, we are overtaxed. Serikali inatua inatumaliza. We do not have money to spend on anything else because KRA is always knocking and taking everything away from us. That is issue number one. But I also want to look at, you've said that, Professor, it is important for us to look at local investors. And when you look at our economy, it is largely agriculture based. But one thing that we do as a country, and that has been the shortfall for many African countries, right? We have our coffee, but we sell the beans, and we import back the processed coffee. We have our tea, we do not process it and export finished tea. How is that affecting the economy in terms of growing? Because we're saying we need to invest in the local people. And one would say, if we value add on the resources that we do have in our agriculture, if it's tomatoes, it gets to the market on time, that we are able to process that into, if it's ketchup, and we sell that outside. If it's onions, we are able to dehydrate the same and sell them outside. But we are not doing that. Should this be a new shift of us looking at this the economy in terms of value addition on local produce that we do have to say that our economy is getting maximum returns from that which we do have?
I think that's the best question you have asked today. Let me start with high taxes very briefly, because there's no time Kenyans will say they are not being overtaxed. They always complain. But have always offered a solution. If Kenyans see where that tax money is going, they feel it, they'll stop complaining. If I see the schools are running, the hospitals are running, there are roads, there are no potholes, there's new railway line, I'm secure at home, I don't need to worry about insecurity and so on.
Can you use Southern Bypass and not get attacked?
That is it. They are not going to complain. So I will keep on saying that Kenyans have never refused to pay taxes. They are simply saying, show us where our taxes are going. Now, on value addition, let's give credit where it is due. The UDA government was very heavy on that when they got into power. And they have been talking about it, coming up with industrial parks.
EPZs, yes.
And it's not the first time, by the way. Even the government of Moi Kibaki, Uhuru Kenyatta, they all talked about value addition. But I think it's an area we have refused to exploit. Because if Kenya has, for example, agriculture contributes about 25% of the GDP, that means if we brought value addition, we could make that even 50%. For example, one of the countries that does very well in coffee value addition is Germany. Germany does all grow coffee. Now, I always get amused when I go to restaurants and somebody is offering me English tea. I've been to England, and England does not grow any tea.
Not even a single bush.
But they add value to that tea, and they make so much money. So when you go to US, you get English tea and other countries. So when you go to other countries, you take coffee that has been value added. The other day, there was a hurarabu here in this country about potatoes. From of all places, Egypt. And I thought when people were quarreling in Nyandarua the other day, they should have been talking about value addition of potatoes because it's a type of food there. So I think that to me is a low-lying fruit. If we focus on value addition for agricultural products, I think even the taxes we are talking about will go up. There will be more jobs. Everyone will be happy. But I don't know why it has taken so long. And if you look at agriculture, you don't need a lot of technology to value add. A good example would be yogurt. Compare the value of yogurt and the value of milk. It's significantly much more. Or powdered milk. Or if you compare value of Nescafe coffee compared with coffee when it is raw beans. So what we need to do is you look at the whole supply chain from the farm up to the market. Where can we add value? Where can we extract some value? And that should be the work of counties, the work of the national government, the work of the universities, the work of researchers. Should break down the whole supply chain and asking where can we extract some value here before this coffee goes abroad, before this tea goes abroad, before these minerals goes abroad. Can we extract some value? So I don't know why the governments and the individuals like me and you have taken so long to add value. And finally, for you to add value, there's something we must not forget. You need science and technology. And that is an emphasis we have not put a lot on. Because to add value to coffee, to tea, to minerals and so on, you need some science. I was amused the other day, you cannot believe it, when I looked at some universities in Scotland, they offer a Bachelor of Science in brewing. And are you surprised that most of the breweries, most of the alcoholic drinks come from there? So which university in this country, sorry, I'm from a university, offers a BSc in coffee, in tea. And even when we go to the university and we are telling students to do research, we want them to do research on stock exchange, not on coffee, not on coconut, not on potatoes. That does not look cool enough. So let's make agriculture cool, from the universities to the market, even banks. You say there's a lot of money in the banks. Why are they not lending that money to the farmers? Because they feel they are risky. But the government should be guaranteeing farmers because of food security and because of the strategic importance of this sector. So there's a lot of things we can do and improve our economy without even looking for foreign investors.
Prof, still with you. You brought up issue about counties. So let's just briefly take a look at county allocations, because the division of revenue remains a political battleground. We see time and time again as senators try to implement higher allocations to the counties as the national government pushes back. Have counties managed to be growth engines, or are they simply consumption centers? When you talk about on-source revenue, when you talk about devolving corruption in the counties, give us a status update.
One of the things that I do is, unlike, I don't know about most of you, I travel to the countryside. I like traveling to the countryside. And one is because I grew up there, so I have that attachment to the countryside. So when you ask the question of how the countryside or the counties are performing, I think I can give some reality check. One of the things that has worried me in the last maybe 10, 15 years is billboards. When I travel to the countryside, businesses advertise their services. And one of the most popular advertisements when I go to the countryside are hotels, not factories. So if you use this Thika Superhighway up to Nanyuki or the highway up to Nakuru, you see a lot of adverts, but not for factories. So clearly, counties have not lived to the expectations of being agents of economic growth. But they have done well by being agents of political growth, because there's a lot of politics there. So in addition to value addition, we need to make our counties centers of economic growth. And that was the original dream, because counties know better the products they grow there, the minerals they have there, the assets they have there. So it was envisaged that with devolution, counties will focus on what they have, value add it, get the supply chain to the national government, to the international markets, and grow that. But that has not happened. Again, it's just like value addition. I don't know what they are waiting for. My argument, and Jesse Rogers, I think this is a very important observation, counties should not wait for the national government to give them money. They should generate the money. They have the resources. In fact, some of the money that the government gives them was generated in the counties. But have they done what they are supposed to do to become centers of economic growth? My argument is no. Again, the debate we have been hearing in Kikuyu, in Nyandarua, in other counties should be about economic issues, not political issues. And that will make all the difference.
You know, the professor brings up matters to do with counties, which is, I think, very, very important, because you look at the original design of the counties was to bring power close to the people, bring services close to the people. Counties themselves collect taxes, right, in terms of own source revenue. But there is the aspect of devolved corruption as well that we find ourselves grappling with on a daily basis. One inch the counties do not get the very best that they do deserve, because like Professor says, in Nyandarua, there is an issue of potatoes they have in excess. But what do we see whenever they harvest? It goes to waste. It is not. We're not talking about it. But let's look at the fact that now we have the country Kenya and its budget policy statements and what it wants to achieve, and how we can compare that with the achievements of each and every county if they do plug into the original plan that is the country. Because one would say, for this county to achieve what it wants, it must look at what the national government has set, what they want to have, and even adjust so that they meet at the center. We can't just be going left and others are going right. We must work together to achieve that. Are we seeing a unity of purpose towards achieving development, if it's meeting our budget goals and all that, between national and county governments? And if not, how is that affecting the overall growth of the economy?
Fantastic question. Absolutely, we are not where we should be. I mean, when you look at the synergies that you can derive if the national government was working very well with county governments, I mean, the first issue obviously that comes into play is the allocation. Every other year there is a discussion whether the allocation that is going to the counties is sufficient. But when that money goes to the counties, then the second question comes in, is it even being used for the right purpose? And I think we've had for many years, a lot of this money goes into recurrent expenditure, being salaries and the likes. The amount of money that goes into development projects is very minimal, and at times they are not even able to meet the constitutional limits. The other thing is corruption, and you've said it. What we have in this country is, after every 5 years, we have this issue of paying bills is likely to come in after next year. Because what happens is that the outgoing governor or, the county government, they will do their things. And by the time they come, the new government is coming into force, they will dispute all the bills that have been there.
Yeah.
And the verification exercise that was going on, I mean that was at the national government level, but that happens a lot as well at the county government levels, that there is a lot of misuse of resources. And for instance, if we are talking of them, we have the county aggregation and industry parks that are meant to be there.
Yes.
If that was actually well utilized, because we do not lack the infrastructure in terms of the buildings. In this country, I think we have focused a lot on what people can see, the buildings, putting up a huge building, a tall building, massive buildings. But now, once you do that, and like Prof said, I also travel quite a bit, and I have also seen some digital hubs or sort of very small buildings, indicated as digital hubs or something. But beyond that building, do we provide a supportive ecosystem to ensure that people actually realize the benefits? So, for instance, if you are saying an area like Nyandaro that Prof is referring to, I think they have it is potatoes. I think they have a lot of potatoes, and we still continue here in milk. Here in out, you will find people are complaining that we have a lot of lanes. They are not able to transport their produce. We are now importing potatoes from Egypt and other countries. I mean, literally, if someone starts seriously and a county governor, you may be working together with neighboring governors and set up an industry that actually processing these potatoes. We would actually be having them in the shelves. And I've read the story of one company in India, and I think they process butter. It started from cooperatives in the society. So people, the same way people deliver milk, that butter is processed, and then it's a national product. Most people in India, when you go there, understand it's a household name.
Must be Amul.
Exactly, that could be it. So those kind of things, and those are the stories we should be having in this country, that people are actually proud of the things that they have actually seen come from the grassroots all the way up. So there's a lot that can be done by these governors, but I think we are focused on the visuals. I think this issue of having an ecosystem, pulling people who can actually be there, ensuring that they support and actually market and everything to do with it, we could actually derive a lot. And we are not short of the 5 pillars. I would say those are enough to transform this country. But the issue is they are good on paper. Nothing much is being done on the ground.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Because this is a very interesting debate about the counties. One of the interesting things that I found, I don't care what people say, is President Ruto's dream that Kenya should become a Singapore.
Singapore, yeah.
The best way for Kenya to become a Singapore is for every country to become a Singapore. In fact, every country in this country is bigger than Singapore. So you can imagine what would happen if each country became a Singapore. This country would be very big. And the small things he's talking about that we need to do to make sure that every country become a Singapore and we become an economic superpower. Countries should cooperate among themselves, by the way. They are too independent. So if either road is in one county, it ends in another county. So when counties are, for example, having their budgets, do they sit together with the neighboring counties? They had an idea of economic blocks, but seem to have died. Because a lot of counties have things that are common that can be shared and create some synergy, as they put it. But there's another problem that we need to think about. Charity starts at home. So we talk about East African Community, African Free Trade Area, World Trade Organization, but we never talk about cooperation among ourselves. So we need to focus on that. And finally, something that nobody talks about in this country, which is a big problem with the counties, is brain drain. Remember all your classmates who got first class in campus, who were number 1 in primary school and high school. Where are they? Abroad. They all came to Nairobi or they went abroad. So who is going to take care of the countryside? So countryside should also reverse the brain drain. So the best brains, when they graduate from the university, they go to the countryside and bring innovations and bring this energy we are talking about and bring this value addition we are talking about, because we need science technology.
Well, we operate in a global village. The world is a global village right now, and some of the issues that play out in different countries affect us in one way or the other, especially when we're talking about inflationary pressure in the Kenyan economy. Now, with these global prices seeming quite volatile, when we talk about the wars that are going on. We've just seen a classic example where Donald Trump has ordered a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and it definitely caused the price of oil per gallon to skyrocket. So as we are looking at the 2026-2027 budget, how exactly should we, or should the Kenyan government, protect the Kenyan consumers' purchasing power from these inflationary shocks and pressures? Yeah. Could start with you.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, and like you said, we cannot avoid the external forces. I mean, we in this ecosystem, and one thing happening in Europe, it's unfortunate that we have the war that is happening, and it is expected that the price of oil will, one way or the other, will go up if this is not resolved in the shortest time possible. And, a lot of industries, directly or indirectly, rely on oil. I mean, the price of goods is directly linked to the price of manufacturing, and the cost of manufacturing, if it's electricity, to some extent we use fuel in some cases, and there's a lot of use. Transport, if you're transporting goods, there's a lot of use of that. So what the government has to do is that it has to create a kit, a sort of a kit that is would be available to subsidize the cost of these goods. So for instance, we are saying is the pump prices. We do have a levy that is maintained. It's deducted every liter you consume. So we would hope that they actually dip into that to try and make sure that the price of gasoline and diesel doesn't go beyond a certain threshold. Again, social protection mechanisms. In the budget, we would expect that in the coming budget, if this is not resolved, you would expect a substantial proportion is allocated for social protection programs to ensure that people actually do get resources. The most vulnerable, if you go to the rural areas, I mean, if the prices go beyond a certain threshold, you find people debating whether to have a meal once or twice per day. It doesn't get worse than that. Yeah. So social protection programs in terms of cash transfer, being sent to the people there, the price of very basic commodities, ensuring that it's within a reasonable range. We do not want to get to a place where people are not able to at least afford a meal a day at the very minimum. And then alleviating the cost of, I'll say if you are able to resolve a lot of the basic things, education, healthcare, people are able to actually live, because the issue is when you go to the rural areas, I find a lot of people struggling with medical issues. They're spending a lot of medical bills, which beats the purpose that I'm contributing a lot to the social health insurance fund. So if you're able to alleviate the amount of money they are spending on education and healthcare, then they have quite a bit they can afford to pay for their own food and basic commodities.
Yeah. Prof?
Interesting. One of the questions I follow Middle East very closely. So I've been following what's been happening in Iraq, how the price of oil has moved from about $75 a barrel to about 100 now. And eventually that is going to be reflected here. In fact, one of the things everybody is waiting for is today or tomorrow, to see the price.
Yes.
I expect the price to go up, but I don't expect it to go beyond $200 or 200 Kenyan shillings, strategically because of 2027, maybe because of politics. I think, how do we protect the vulnerable members of the Kenyan society? Subsidies have always worked. So we need to use the subsidies that have been collected from the fuel. But then that is the short run. So we can use subsidies to protect the vulnerable members, the poor, and so on. But in the long run, we need to think of how we can have strategic reserves of oil. Yeah. I have been seeing countries releasing, Japan and others releasing strategic quantities of oil to moderate the price. And I've been wondering how much strategic fuel reserve do we have in Kenya. We need to have that. And in the long run, we need to move maybe to renewables. We have a lot of renewable energy here. We need to think about electric cars, so that when there are such big events elsewhere in the world, we are not very much affected. We are able to protect and weather the storm. And then something else on subsidies, which is very important. If you are going to give subsidies to Kenyans, how will you get them? How will you decide who they are? So the question of trust, the question of registration. So the government gives very good records of our taxes, our income, our life, and so on from their registration. Then it will be very easy to know who needs subsidies and maybe what quantity. But now the data is not that complete. So even Iraqi, you might find him queuing, looking for subsidies because they are available.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good plan, because one of the reasons why we elect a government is to take care of us.
Yes.
Because not all of us will be that fortunate. Thank you.
Prof, I want to bring something in terms of the budget. The budget making process is an extended exercise. It starts around March, I think, of every year until the time when the budget policy statements are being issued, and it's a process that should or must involve each and every single Kenyan as stipulated by the law. Public participation, Kenyans knowing exactly where they are, what is needed, what will change, what will go up, what will go down, and also just the promise that the government would do. But we find ourselves as a people that the only time you'd find Kenyans engaging with the budget is during the presentation of that policy statement with that briefcase, right? But this is that point when one would say is very critical, because then each and every single Mwananchi has an opportunity to give their voice, to participate in the budget making process. Failure then, Professor, for Wananchi to participate in this budget making process, first of all, is it by design? Because when you talk about public participation, what's the quotient? What do we mean when we mean public participation? Do 2 or 10 people represent a county? Do 300,000 represent a country? So in terms of Kenyans participating, and how then does that affect Kenyans when it comes to giving taxes? Because it's saying we are overtaxed, but there was a process that involved why taxes would go up.
I think one of the best inventions of 2010 Constitution was public participation. That has been my observation.
Yeah.
But has it been implemented? I think we are supposed to come up with a law on the process of public participation. Now it's very amorphous.
Yeah.
So you can bribe a few guys, they come and become public participation. But I think it was a great idea.
Yeah.
Why is it a great idea? It is us who pay taxes, and we complain about high taxes and so on. It defeats the logic why we don't go to find out and participate in how that money is used. And that money is ours. So I think we have not educated Kenyans on the importance of public participation. And what happens because they don't participate? Politicians make decisions the way they want.
They want, yeah.
That's why you find out of the bruise, a certain project has been put into the budget. That's why you have supplementary budgets. So my argument is, if you vote and you want good leadership, you want economic growth, then you must participate in you must be party to the public participation. And even the rules have affirmed that.
Yes.
There are some projects that have been cancelled just because there was no public participation. And I think as a part of civic engagement, our MPs, our leaders, our whoever you are, we should be talking about how should we have the public participating. But the public will not participate if they don't have the knowledge about what it's all about. Because you can go and sit there, but you don't know what people are talking about. That's why we need to have budgets written in language we can understand. I don't understand why the budget cannot be translated into Swahili, into Pokomo, into Omoro, into Luo. Is it that hard with all the AI? So that my mother, who is 90 years old, can read it and understand what it's all about. Yeah. And she can say, this is what we need: a road, we don't need a hospital. We need a school, we don't need this. But now we have left it to politicians, and they are taking full advantage of it.
Prof, you bring something that is very important, because even the Constitution itself recognizes our ethnic diversities, right? And it says it is what then makes us as a country. And I think this is
the beauty in the proverb.
The beauty, yes, exactly. And you see, now I think this is that point where, again, counties would bridge that gap because they represent different ethnic diversities that we have in the country. And perhaps if this public participation is a conversation that would be held between national county governments, even in the budget making processes, so that county X that has predominantly these ethnic group would take the initiative and break it down, so that they spend less in it, make sure that everyone in that county understands what this budget policy statement means. Jesse?
Maybe 2 questions, each to guests. Social safety nets. We've seen the impetus of Inua Jamii, Nyota program. How do you classify them? As handouts or proper economic empowerment? Because questions have been raised on their sustainability. Equally, I'd like you take on matters to do with debt servicing, because as it stands, the servicing exceeds development expenditure. We're told out of every 100 shillings, 70 or more goes to debt servicing. Is there any room left to grow out of debt, or are we just, taxing in order to pay interest? How exactly are we?
Okay, thank you. On the social safety net, and I'm very happy that you've asked this question, because I've also been asking myself, and probably it's a question for people to research, the academicians. When I look at the history of this country, we've had a lot of funds, starting with the Youth Fund, Women Enterprise Fund. We have the Hustler Fund. I think we now have the Nyota Fund.
Yeah.
They are countless. We've had funds. And the question I've been asking myself, why is it that they don't appear to be, probably giving the benefits or bringing the benefits that they're expected to bring? And the question is it that they are not very well structured? Is it the delivery? Where is the issue? Because that social safety net, and it's a very popular thing when you talk of politicians, when they're speaking to the masses. We are starting this. So, for instance, I as a person, because I also did economics as an undergrad, I decided to test the Hustler Fund because, the talk was, the Hustler Fund is meant to assist the SMEs, the mama boggers, the people who are buying things in the morning.
To access credit.
Exactly, because they had been blocked from the formal sector because of blacklisting and all that. And the question was it not well marketed? Because from my testing, it could have worked probably in a way, because I started every morning. I would actually borrow. I got a limit of 3,000. I would borrow in the morning and pay in the evening, I think, with a few cents. And I did that for many, many months. Just to see whether this product would work. And for sure, after many months, the limit was actually increased to almost 50,000 after very many months. So the issue is, this product, from where I see it, should have worked if well implemented.
Okay.
But I think the fact that it came from the government, it was not well, people are not well educated on the use, because the cost of debt is they charge about 8% per year. It's like a few shillings per day or less. So the delivery of these social protection programs, I think there's a missing gap. It's good, but I think there's something that needs to be done to ensure they actually people enjoy the benefits. Yeah. On the last point on debt servicing, it's a problem. Our debt to GDP ratio is about 67%. What we've been doing in this country, I know we haven't defaulted on the Euro boards or the local boards, but we've been taking boards to refinance, other boards.
Yeah.
So it's a problem that we actually having. So hopefully we're able to get over it. But I do agree it's something that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Many issues to canvas, Professor, in 30 seconds.
Hey, very interesting. Yeah. Social safety makes economic sense, because even developed countries that we admire, whose constitutions we copied, they have safety nets. So if you go to US, if you go to Western Europe, you go to European Union, they have welfare funds.
Yes.
And such, when you take care of the most disadvantaged members of the society, you create social harmony. There's less crime. And that is the conducive environment for economic growth. For debt, I think we need to stop waste. And I think that's the question. That is the elephant in the room. We stop waste, so that instead people have asked, why should you get money, or should you get money to pay for waste instead of paying debts? And finally, it's very important that we live within our means.
We live within our means.
Yes.
A beautiful place to end up. That is Dr. Exeni Iraq, is an economist, and Robert Maina, Associate Director, EY Tax, making Kenya's budget works. And Wananchi, get out there and participate in public participation, because you have the right to know. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.